Welcome to the Unveiled Epic Echoes channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery. On the outskirts of a pine-heavy valley in northern New England, where fog settles like a thoughtful pause and the wind carries the faint scent of chalk and wet leaves, there once stood a school that taught lessons no record remembers. A school that existed long enough to shape lives, and then vanished so completely that even its absence was forgotten, leaving behind only a quiet wrongness in the land and a handful of people who sensed they were missing something they could not name. It was called Preparatory, though that name would later dissolve from maps, archives, and memory as if it had never been spoken aloud. And it was founded in 1908 under the modest claim of educating gifted children from rural communities. Yet from the beginning it drew the attention of scholars, mystics, and government observers who understood that what offered went beyond arithmetic and grammar into something older, deeper, and unsettlingly patient. The school was built atop a ridge once used by native elders as a listening ground, a place where echoes behaved strangely, and stories were said to linger longer than voices. And long before classrooms were raised, stones carved with spiral glyphs had been arranged there in a pattern meant to teach time how to fold without breaking. The headmaster was a reserved man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that reflected more than they revealed, a former academic who believed history had been edited too aggressively, that certain truths had been cut out not because they were false, but because they were dangerous to linear thinking. And under his guidance, students learned to read not just books but patterns, learning how civilizations rose and fell not as accidents but as rhythms, how forgotten languages still hummed beneath modern speech, and how memory itself could be shaped, stored, and if necessary, hidden. One of those students was enrolled in 1921 at the age of 12, a girl with an exceptional recall and a sensitivity to silence, who would later struggle to explain why certain moments in her life felt like echoes of lessons she could no longer remember, only that taught her to listen to what history avoided saying. The school operated quietly through 2 world wars, its students rarely speaking of their education, not because they were sworn to secrecy, but because language failed them when they tried, and by the early 1950s had become a concern to agencies that preferred history stable and predictable, especially when reports surfaced suggesting that graduates had an unusual ability to anticipate cultural shifts, political unrest, and technological breakthroughs years before they occurred. Not through prophecy, but through pattern recognition that bordered on the uncanny. The tension reached its peak in 1957, when a federal review committee arrived unannounced and discovered that its curriculum included no standardized testing, no grades, and no official records beyond handwritten journals stored in a subterranean archive beneath the school. Journals that described alternate timelines, suppressed discoveries, and events that almost happened but were deliberately prevented to preserve broader continuity. Argued that existed as a pressure valve for history, a place where dangerous knowledge could be taught safely, contained within minds trained to hold it without acting rashly. But the committee saw only risk, and within weeks, a decision was made not merely to close the school, but to remove it from the story of the nation entirely. On the night of October 14, 1958, Preparatory conducted its final lesson, one not written on any board, as guided students and faculty through a ritual of remembrance and release, activating the old stone pattern beneath the school that resonated with the land's original purpose, not to destroy, but to forget selectively, allowing to be erased not by fire or demolition, but by consensus between place and time. By morning, the buildings were gone, the ridge returning to trees and moss, records altered subtly but completely, enrollment lists never existing, photographs fading into blanks, and the memories of those who attended smoothed over, leaving behind only emotional impressions without context, a sense of loss without an object. Woke that day miles away with tears on her face and no idea why, only the lingering knowledge that she had once learned something important about the world, and that it had been taken gently from her to keep her safe. Decades later, in the 1990s, a graduate student researching rural education anomalies noticed inconsistencies in census data from the region, a curious gap where hundreds of children seem to have vanished from records for several decades. And while his findings were dismissed as clerical error, hikers began reporting strange sensations on the ridge, moments of clarity followed by deep calm, children asking questions their parents could not answer, and dreams of classrooms with windows facing nowhere. The climax of the story did not come as revelation, but as acceptance, when now elderly returned to the valley drawn by a feeling she finally recognized as familiarity, sitting quietly among the trees and realizing that the lessons taught were not lost but redistributed, seeded into the culture in subtle ways, influencing empathy, caution, and the quiet understanding that some knowledge must mature unseen. Preparatory remained erased, its name never restored, its buildings never rebuilt, but its purpose endured in the way history hesitated before repeating its worst mistakes, in the pauses between cause and effect, and in the unspoken agreement that not everything forgotten is lost, and not everything hidden is meant to be found. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you, and see you again.